Stay right there. What are you waiting for? Kill them! Kill them both! No, wait a minute. Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want.
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
There's a lot up, especially in the solar system right now.
Mm-hmm. I know that Ketu is in an interesting conjunction, and I know we're in a very martial period. Ketu in flame, or Mars, as we talked about in our episode 18, Ocean of Stars. I'm so excited to have you back. There was such a phenomenal outpouring of love from that episode, and it's interesting because pre-recording you mentioned that you didn't really know who she was. Well, I didn't know who she was either. So it was like two kind of dreamers going into an episode without much in the way of preconception. And we were able to sort of give a story to her birth chart. So I really appreciate that, especially you. Obviously, I just contributed in my small way, but you really brought it to life. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Beatty, for coming back on. And I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me on. I love doing the shows with you, and I'm just really pleased and really flattered that I got the level of reception that I got from your audience. Again, not knowing the first thing about Lana Del Rey, having sampled her music only briefly because it didn't appeal to me. And yet there is something about this woman, after I did looked at her astrology for the first show and did sample a bit of her music, even if I don't like it, there is something very compelling about her. She emits a certain type of an energy, and I think I explained that partially in our previous show because of the intensity of the planets in her birth horoscope. She's got a power-packed birth horoscope that I did go over. And what I wanted to bring to today was in furtherance of what I've been studying lately, and come up with just basically since last summer, which is learning about the asteroids of astrology, and which for a long time I didn't want to have anything to do with, because when I was learning astrology, the 10 planets were enough. They were way more than enough to learn and get a handle on. Then if you bring in asteroids, which really are just minor planets, they're small bodies in outer space that orbit the sun with the rest of the solar system. Most of them are between Mars and Jupiter. Many, many more that are recently being discovered are beyond the orbit of Neptune, which is way out. That's almost outside the solar system. It was too much. There's the hundreds of thousands. There's over 1 million of them, actually. But what happened was I saw a couple of astrologers working with them, and I was intrigued because of the level of detail that they offered. So I thought, well, if this is something that could help me, why shouldn't I at least experiment with it? So it was less than a year ago. It really was only maybe last spring, beginning of the summer, that I began to look into the asteroids, and I became obsessed with the asteroids to such a degree that I almost don't do anything else in astrology but read them now because of the extent of precision that they offer about a situation. And I'll tell you why. When they were first, the first one was discovered was 1801. And in the 1800s up into about 1900, they discovered maybe 430 asteroids. Now, this is the 1800s. Everything was still, education was still on a very classical level, whereby you still learned Latin, you still had a certain style of writing. It was a very erudite experience to be studying science. It wasn't for the masses. You had to be incredibly well educated. And so, what they did was when they discovered an asteroid, they would name it after a classical character, a mythological character. And for the first 100 years, it was always women. So the first asteroid is Ceres, and the second one, or the third one, I get them mixed up. There's Pallas, Athene, Juno, Vesta, the classical Greek women who are very well known. And so they started naming the asteroids after these women who all had a distinctive role in Greek and Roman mythology. Ceres was the goddess of agriculture and grain. You get the word cereal from Ceres. And so she represented taking care of the hearth, taking care of the home. What do you have inside of you that can be productive on the outside of you? So that was when they started to name all the asteroids after mythological characters. And all of these characters have their own stories. They have their own myths from Greek and Roman mythology. And so, in order to understand what the asteroid was about, you kind of had to know the little bit of backstory. Who were they? What did they do in their lives? What were their traits and characteristics? And that was how you began to understand how to read them in astrology, in the astrology chart. It's the same thing, say, for example, as Venus or Mars. Venus was the goddess of beauty and love. Where Venus is placed, excuse me, is where we like something. It's what we value. It's what we like. It's what we love. Where Mars is placed, the god of war, also called Ares, that's where we are aggressive. We can be combative. We have desires. We are active. It's an action principle. Mars is active. It could be aggression, and it could be what you do, how you apply yourself. Mercury is a messenger god, so it's about communication, it's about thought, it's about writing, it's about self-expression. Because Hermes did that, he was a messenger god. So if you take that sort of paradigm and apply it to the asteroids, you use the same filter in understanding what they mean. And that's where the wealth of the asteroids comes in, because there's so many of them and they are so specific, and their stories are on point as they relate to human experience. And when I started to realize that was what they were really about, I was like, how could I have ignored these all these years? They are so informative, to the point where I use them not only I don't really do birth charts a lot. I do them when people ask me to talk about something like on your show, but I use them for event charts as well, because they tell you things, they provide information. And because they're smaller bodies, they're called the minor planets, they tend to focus more on detail. So when I started to learn this last year, I decided, well, when I come across an asteroid in somebody's chart, let me make a list of it, because there's so many to learn and remember, and it's just overwhelming. And that's why I avoided them for so long. It was too much information. So I started to make a list, and I found that when I wanted to look one up to see what it represented, I had to go to this blog and that website and this website and that blog, and there was no one reference that I could turn to. There was no encyclopedia, there was no dictionary. And I was like going nuts. I was like, every day I'm going through all these different websites to find out what one means. And it struck me one day, I'm sitting at my desk writing a list, and I put at the top of the paper directory. I thought, that's it. I should do the directory. There is no directory of these astral bodies. So I guess it was last June. I thought, I'm going to do that. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to dig up everything I could find and just put a book out. So by December 30th, just a little over a week ago, I put a book out entitled Asteroids Are Cosmic Influencers. And that is basically a directory of 400 asteroids that I chose because I kept seeing them. They were the most commonly referenced online. And when you use asteroid software, those were the ones that came up first. Being that there are thousands of them, you can't possibly get them all in. But I thought, I'm going to start with 400 and see how it goes. So over the span of 6, 7 months, that's all I did. I did this book and I did all the research. And what was the most fun about doing it was I thought, well, it's one thing to just have these lists of information on a page. Let me get some living examples of these asteroids so that people can instantly relate to the characteristics that I'm trying to describe. So I went and I would go through them and look for different characteristics and try to think of people that would match that. And so I prepared lists of celebrities, politicians, historical figures, actors and actresses, writers, criminals, because I do a lot of true crime. Of course, the whole list of serial killers got in there. And it went on. And people in the news and famous writers and whoever I could think of. So then I had to do, that was kind of a lot of meticulous work, tedious work, actually. Sometimes it really got to me how tedious it was, but to look up everybody's chart and look up all the asteroids in there and compile lists of what was in there. And the beauty of that was it gave me such a wealth of knowledge and understanding of the myths behind these astral bodies and how we are living those out in our daily lives. We are just living mythical stories in our daily lives. I mean, there was a goddess series of crops, but there are people all over with a prominent series in their horoscope that are productive and take care of things and harvest things for everyone's lives. They could be in farming. They could be teachers. And so that was the beauty of the book, was being able to express to people, here's an example of that asteroid. And I came across some really interesting, I don't want to say, I guess I should say generalizations, because there were distinct categories where the asteroids kept falling. Because as I said, they're very specific. They're not, Mars can represent hundreds of things. Asteroids are not hundreds of things. As I said, they're more specific. So I started playing around with some of them based on their stories, some of the better known myths, which I'm going to focus on in our talk today. I think I'd bring up Orpheus, because that is such a powerful story of a man, of a god. And because of what he did and who he was, his asteroid turns up prominently in the chart of rock stars. And I'll pick one out right now. Lana Del Rey. I don't want to say she's a rock star. She's got her own genre of music pretty much. But Lana has a very prominent Orpheus. And I guess now I should probably explain why I'm saying Orpheus pertains to rock stars. And that's because Orpheus is one of the most tragic figures in Greek mythology. He was a musician and he played the lyre, which in today's world is the guitar. So Orpheus, think of him as a rock star guitarist. He was beloved by people. He had women chasing after him. It was typical rock star type of a life, except that he was in love with a woman named Eurydice. And they were to be married, except that on the day of the wedding, she was bitten by a snake and she died. As in so many Greek myths, time and again, we see this horrible tragedy befalling somebody. life is good and then life is tragic. And that's the story that keeps being promoted throughout a lot of these myths. So he loses Eurydice and he's completely heartbroken, but he goes to the underworld and he asks Hades, the god of the underworld, can you please bring her back? I can't live without her. And so they cut a deal finally that he can bring her back up to the out of the underworld up to the earth, except when he's coming back with her, he cannot look back at her. If he looks back at her, the deal's off and she's gone. She's gone back underground. So they're climbing back out of the underworld and it's foggy and it's hazy out and he can't see her. So he's afraid she gets lost. So he turns around and looks at her and bang, okay, she's gone. He loses her back to Hades. And he is bereft once again. He blew it. You know, he had a chance to bring her back, but he broke the rule and he lost Eurydice for a second time. So now he's wandering around and all these women are flocking to him because now they know he's single. And they're like, you know, coming on to him. They want to be with him and making advances, and he doesn't want any part of it. So like hell hath no fury. The women get pissed off and they start to chase him. They chase him across these fields where there are farmers tilling the soil. And the farmers see this riot and they just drop their tools and run. The women, who are crazed with jealousy and anger by now, having been rejected, grab these tools and tear Orpheus to pieces. So at the end, what has made him beloved, his music and his popularity and his beauty, ended up destroying him. And as it often does in the lives of rock stars and famous celebrities, it's almost too much to handle. And how many times have we seen rock stars needing security up the wazoo because they don't want to be attacked by their own fans? We've seen that. We've seen people get mobbed by crowds, you know, women going crazy screaming. They're actually trying to rip off a piece of clothing. They want a lock of the guy's hair. It becomes a scene of insanity. So Orpheus's lifestyle kind of did him in, except at the end, if you look at it from a more holistic viewpoint, he was reunited with Eurydice because he was able to join her in the afterlife. So it did have a happy ending of sorts. I mean, after being torn to pieces, you would hope that something good would come of it. But that I keep seeing Orpheus, which to me is the symbol of great fame and adulation, being able, but posing the risk of tearing you apart, because it does destroy so many people that get into that lifestyle. Either they can't handle it, they can't handle the pressure, or they succumb to drugs or alcohol or some unhealthy lifestyle. And that's why so many of them die so young. And so I'm not saying that this is going to happen to Lana, but I'm saying that it's prominent in her horoscope that she is on the path of somebody of fame. People want a part of her. And you just have to be careful. You have to be circumspect in that lifestyle. And I know that she is also involved in many activities which are sort of, I don't want to say the dark side, but magic, stuff like that. We've already talked about that. And so maybe that's her way of getting a handle on things. But all of these people need some kind of an outlet to balance that. And so Orpheus is there. I'm going to talk a little bit later about Orpheus with some other people, because that's especially Elvis. I'm fascinated by Elvis's chart right now, so I'll bring him up in a little while. But I wanted to get back to Lana because she had some really interesting, as were her planets, her asteroids are equally interesting. And they point to things that we discussed before, but because we didn't look at these, but they're actually agreeing with everything that we already came up with, and they're actually enhancing it to an extent. She has, and the way I'm doing this is when you look at a horoscope, you compare the planets, where they're placed, how do they interact with each other, what do they represent. You do the same thing with the asteroid. Look at what is it interacting with in the person's chart. She's got some really strong activity right around her sun, which is at 0 degrees Cancer, which in itself is a very strong energy point. The zero, it's the birth, it's the beginning. All this new, tremendously creative energy coming from her. And I have to say, for not caring for her music, her discography impresses the hell out of me, because that woman has produced so much music, and she's only 39 years old. She's got an amazing portfolio of music that she's come out with, because she is so creative. So what she has configured with her sun is actually a centaur asteroid. Now, centaurs come from mythology. They were part man, and the upper half was man, the lower half was beast. Usually it was a horse, and they were called the centaurs. The centaurs are a different, I guess, category of asteroids, but they all belong in the same general group. And this one is called Asbolus. And Asbolus was a centaur, which by nature, they are very in tune with nature. The centaurs, being half beast, of course, they're in tune with their environment and sensitive to nature, and also extremely highly sexually driven, because they are a part beast. They're very large, usually. They're very strong. They're very powerful. I've seen centaurs in the horoscopes of a lot of athletes, just because they have that tremendous physical strength and agility. So she has Asbolus, and I'm not saying that regards her physicality, but Asbolus was a centaur who could read omens. He could read the signs of nature, because he was so in tune with the movements of the elements and the animals and the wind and the stars. So she has that ability, which we know because she goes into deep states of consciousness. She is comfortable there. Her songs bring that out, that she has that magical kind of connection with things, that almost otherworldly, sometimes underworldly, because she was so obsessed with death when she was growing up. So she has Asbolus there. That describes her. And just as an aside, who else has that is the magician Aleister Crowley. He had Asbolus. He was reading signs from nature as well. So that's something kind of specific that I don't know that you would get from reading, say, off her Mercury or her third house. The next one that she has, which is really a beautiful asteroid, they're not all from Greek and Roman mythology, by the way. As time went on, after the 1900s and 2000s, they started to be named for of African gods, Egyptian gods, all kinds of things. They have really weird names, some of them. You can't even pronounce them. But this one is a really beautiful image. It's this is a mythical bird in Chilean mythology called the alicanto. It was a bird that lived in the desert. And at night, it emitted this light that travelers would look for as a guide. So, in my view, the interpretation of Alicanto is that Lana's contribution, her creativity, is a light for some people. It's a guide for some people. She's expressing things that people may be inspired by, that they may want to feel comforted by. There's that light in the darkness. Thus, I can relate to her. I can relate to what she's singing. And she's singing out of the darkness because that's where her consciousness is at. She looks on the dark side of a lot of things. So to have the Alicanto is really very special, I think. And we've talked a lot about her being into magical stuff. She has configured to her Mars the asteroid Cassandra, which is a Greek mythological princess who was a prophetess. She was a seer of the future. She was a sorceress. And Cassandra had a sad story. A lot of them had sad stories, and you can understand why. When she would make a prophecy for the future, people didn't listen to her for some reason. They sort of poo-pooed what she had to say. And so she would make prophecies and give warnings of events to happen, and nobody listened. And then the thing would happen, and it would be, a calamity, and she would be heartbroken because she would have tried to prevent it, but nobody paid her any mind. So eventually Cassandra felt so shut out of things, such an outlier, that she took her own life. That's one of the sadder Greek princesses. but she had the vision. She was a visionary, which I think in a lot of ways Lana is with what she perceives. And that was with Mars. Also, she gets well, first of all, yeah, also has Mars configured to Hera. Hera is the wife of Zeus, and like the top-notch goddess, one of the most powerful big-wig goddesses of all Greek mythology. And Hera was a handful. She was a powerful woman, but she was also extremely emotional. She was extremely jealous to the point where she would do things to people she was jealous of. She would put curses on them, which is kind of funny because when Trump was first elected in 2016, Lana didn't like him and she put a curse on him. I don't know that it ever worked. I don't know what it was about. Obviously, the man's still around, but she actually put a curse on Trump. And that it's kind of something Hera would do. If she didn't like you, she would do something to you. So she has that configured to her Mars, which is activity and also possible violence. And who else has that? Kamala Harris has a Hera prominent, and Hillary Clinton has a prominent Hera. So you can just do the math there. And the two things that I really think speak. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, DBD, I didn't want to
No, no
interrupt
problem.
you when you were on your flow because it's so great and it was a beautiful storytelling. So let me just say that. But
Thank you.
I have a couple notes, but I'll just do one right now and then I'll kind of let you roll and then I'll come back in. But so Hera's really interesting to me from a tantric perspective because in Tantra, the or even in Kabbalah, you could say like Tiferet, it would make sense is like the peacock, the wife of Zeus, the wife of Jupiter, the wife of Hesed, but then there's also a martial quality you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That and she's also jealous. So we
Mm-hmm.
actually have a goddess that is like this, that is considered to be jealous, that is
Mm-hmm.
considered to be married sometimes to Jupiter, that is considered to be, we'll say, associated with peacocks sometimes. But she is she's more of a clipolithic goddess. She's a goddess of snakes. Her symbol is
Mm-hmm.
the kind of birthing of eggs and snakes. So she has this like association with it. But it's interesting to me that the Greeks sort of have a similar personality, but she kind of has like these darker flaws that are represented in Tantra as sort of in they're seen as like a lower being. So that's interesting. And then, but I think what something you said, I think in the whole narration was that in tantric Jyotish or tantric astrology, we would say, of course, I agree with you that it's important to look at all of the asteroids and their correspondences, but it is interesting that we would use Ketu as sort of the catch-all for all of these astral bodies. I just think that's interesting because a lot of the stories you're telling actually happened to him in the Buddhist stories as well,
Mm-hmm.
like the sort of the Orpheus story, and you're saying that he got torn apart. That
Mm-hmm.
also happens to Rahu, or
Mm-hmm.
that yeah, it happens to Rahu in the
Mm-hmm.
Puranas. So he get his head gets severed and he falls to the ground, and then he gets dismembered in another life. I mean, he has several lives that were very, we'll say, tumultuous. But it
Right.
is interesting that there's like a sort of parallel kind of yeah, there's a parallel story. I think a parallel structure of these things, like a maybe a mytho poetic astrotheological layer. So I'm sorry, BD. I'll let you keep going. I just wanted to add a little of that.
Oh no, I welcome that, and please don't hesitate to interrupt me because I do get on a roll, and who knows where it'll end up. So don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask, and that's a good observation because basically my understanding of Ketu is where we came from, and that's a big melting pot of events, isn't it? And incidents and circumstances. It takes in just about everything where you came from. Where did we come from? All these stories, all these experiences of others around us that we we experience sort of vicariously. So it doesn't make sense. I didn't look at it that way before, but it does make sense.
Absolutely. And he is kind of the illusion of the world in story, like exactly what you're saying. Like in the smaller bodies, in the smaller astral bodies, he is composite. So he's almost like a klipa or an aggregation. But
Yeah.
he himself is not evil. Like you're not saying that the asteroids in themselves are evil. They accentuate things that are already in the planets. Like Ketu is inflamed by the fire of Mars. Well, that makes sense because Ketu is smoky, like the tail of an asteroid.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Anyways, that's all I have, BD. So,
Oh no.
I do
Yeah.
want to ask you about Lana and love because since the last time we spoke, she actually got married.
Oh, well, I have that coming up in my from my. I wasn't don't worry, I wasn't going to leave that out for sure
Okay,
because
okay, okay.
that was like a major shockwave around her fandom.
Hmm.
And yeah, I looked into that, to tell you the truth. I did a chart for her wedding day, and you can like superimpose an event on top of a person's birth chart and look at what was interacting, what was confluence, and all those things. And I found it interesting. It was not a day I would have picked to get married. I'm not going to make any predictions because I don't go there with astrology, but that is not a day I would have picked, mainly because the moon position was really kind of I don't want to say dangerous. I don't like the position it was in, and I'll say why. The moon was in late degrees of Cancer, and it happened to be in the same degree as Mars. And I don't think you want a marital union with those two incompatible energies of emotion and sensitivity combined with a Mars in Cancer, which does not behave as a normal Mars should. It's in what we call it's in its fall, actually. No, it's in its detriment. I'm sorry. Mars in Cancer can be very selfish, very self-centered, very protective, but can also be violent when it is threatened. So I don't like put the moon and Mars together on that day. And I don't know what time of day, which was September 26, 2024. I don't know what time of day she was married, but for the major part of the day, Mars was always hovering around this position the moon was hovering around this position of Mars. And I just didn't like that. And I don't like late degrees of signs. They're either in the term of Mars or in the term of Saturn, which colors the influence of what it represents. It kind of brings it down. And so
100%.
not only is the moon and Mars together in Cancer, they trine Neptune, which makes for a very
Ooh.
fantasy, lovely, romantic wedding day, dreamy and promising and full of hopes and imagery. But it also exactly opposed Pluto, which is upheaval, which is transformation. And in order for transformation, it means you tear it down in order to build it. It's like the Tower card. The
Hmm.
Tower card is
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
tarot is not Pluto. I think it's Mars, but it's the same idea.
Hmm.
Pluto is
Hmm. Hmm.
transformation. Pluto was discovered the same year that we built the atom bomb,
Hmm.
and it embodies those characteristics. 1930 was when we built it, and that was when Pluto was discovered. And it can be destructive. And I don't like Mars in opposition to Pluto, which it was in September. And a lot of people were going through heavy duty conflict, physical, emotional, real stressed out conflict.
Hmm.
Whenever Mars has touched Pluto a couple of times this year in that regard, and it's been like explosive. I was involved in one such situation that was almost explosive because some of the people in it were so emotionally charged. And I looked up the day. I thought, oh God, it was Mars Pluto that was happening.
Hmm. Hmm.
Other thing with the moon on that day, it is conjunct the asteroid Karma, which is self explanatory. They were meant to marry. This is something they have to go through. It's very important. But I'm not saying the marriage is doomed by any stretch of the imagination. I don't see Lana marrying in a bland, passive way. She's a very intense person. She's going to have an intense union with somebody. She wouldn't be attracted to it otherwise.
Mhm.
So it could be a very interesting union. I really hope the best. I didn't see
Mhm.
anything else
Mhm.
in there that made me concerned, except the moon being important on an important event. And I think it's going to be an emotionally intense experience, which, as I said, that's Lana. That's what she does.
Yeah, no, you're totally right, BD. I just have two observations. So when you're saying Mars Pluto conjunction, or they're in some kind of interrelationship.
They're
So
in an opposition. Sorry.
opposition, excuse
Yeah.
me. No, that's my fault. In tantric astrology, those two things are, even though we don't necessarily call it Pluto, I can say, okay, I'll just, for this conversation, I'll call it Pluto. But when those two things are in like a relationship or in any kind of relationship, there is a explosive reaction.
Hmm.
Mars is like, I often call it the flint lock, the sort of the hammer on a musket.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then Ketu is obviously the smoke that's produced, but there has to be a third thing. And that third thing is the gunpowder, that kind of shiny, metallic, dark, not necessarily black, or powder, the sort of the debris of flux, because it's metallic as well, right?
Hmm.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, that has to, that the sort of the electricity of that kind of energetic, the thing that puts it into motion, that's kind of Pluto. And interestingly, you were also talking about Neptune. Well, Neptune and Mars have a very interesting relationship because Neptune is often said to be the graveyard of flux. So, like the
Hmm.
graveyard of that metal after. And if you look at tantric astrology, they would maybe consider Neptune as the terminus for Ketu. So, like a graveyard of the asteroids, a graveyard of the smoke. I just think that that's an interesting allegory for people to think about. But then about the moon, well, it's very Babylon working to have
Hmm.
Mars sort of. You could think of it as like Mars is pouring its fire onto the foundation that is the moon, but because the moon is a kind of place for rectification, if you think of her marriage in magical terms, like this is how I was thinking when you were telling the story. I personally think it's intentional. I think that it's a magical act. That doesn't mean it's not real. It
Hmm.
just is like it's a magical ritual in a way, because the greatest magical ritual is how you live your life. So she's doing this marriage. It's with a like a, well, supposedly he's a MAGA guy or a pro Trump guy. And so I just think it's interesting that she did that. And then you're talking about the Cancer in Mars, or Mars in Cancer. Sometimes according to Mario from Symbolic Studies, sometimes the crab can be understood as a scorpion.
Hmm.
So there's like an element there in Tantra. We would say the scorpion is the symbol of aggressive martial magic. So if
Hmm.
she put a curse onto Trump, that could be depicted in iconography as a scorpion,
Hmm.
like a curse itself. So I just think
Right.
it's interesting, those two things. And then, like, because she's a girl, so she is kind of like the Babylon vessel in a way. Like she's getting married for the first time. The Babylon daughter is a bride. I just think that there's something very metaphysically interesting. She's 39. That's like the Talima number is 93 as like the number for the beast. Like that was Crowley's
Right.
favorite number, supposedly. I
Right.
just think
Right.
that there's something interesting there.
Hmm.
It's not an aspersion. I think it's cool personally, but I'm just saying that I think that it is like exactly what you're saying, but it's like kind of intentional too. Like she is performing ritual actions in the way that she lives her life. Okay, I'm sorry, BD. Please continue.
Oh no, please, no. Like I said, please feel free to interrupt me anytime because those are such salient points, and it really adds to what I've been saying as well. That of course
I
I'm
think so
sure
too.
it was an intentional thing. I think that's going to characterize the union that they have is that
Hmm.
that level of intensity, and what leads into the next ones, which just spell it out loud and clear. She has her moon in Leo, which in with the asteroids interacts with two asteroids that are exactly conjunct each other, which packs a real power punch. And one asteroid is called Chaos, and one is called Circe. Circe was a sorceress. She was the person that would put a jinx on somebody, again, like Hera. She turned a bunch of, the Odysseus, the wanderer, the traveler in the Odyssey. She turned a bunch of his soldiers into pigs. She would get mad at people and turn them into goats or animals. Turned Odysseus's guys into pigs, which somehow did not estrange him from her because later on they had a child together. So go figure how that energy was working. But Circe and Chaos are united and they interact in a stress aspect with her moon, which is Leo. So that's telling me she is way into this type of activity, as we already supposed, and but not completely in mastery of it because it's a stress aspect. It's something she works at. It's something she aspires to. But somehow, somewhere, it stresses her moon. I don't think she's fully embracing it or fully accepting the possible consequences. And chaos. I'll just say, as an aside, not to cut you off there.
No, please go ahead.
Who else? Who else has chaos? Just these are great examples. Jimmy Savile, the British pedophile. Chaos. He caused chaos for hundreds of people. Harvey Weinstein, ditto. And Jeffrey Dahmer, who was a cannibalistic serial killer. They all had chaos jumping out of their charts. Now, for Circe, other women who look to charm using charms and magic and, manipulation of the energies, maybe curses as well. Kim Kardashian and Courtney Love. And I can see Courtney Love loud and clear with this stuff. I mean, forget it. She's in a lot of the difficult asteroids that I did research into. So those are signature ones for Lana. And what was interesting yeah.
I just want to say I do consider Kim K a witch. I've said it before. I personally think she's like a Telemite. I'm not using it as an aspersion. It's just an idea I've had for a long time. I mean, they run the Agape Church. I mean, it's almost like if you know, you're like, oh, it's so obvious, right? Like, but if you don't know, it seems like such a stretch. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it's like, okay. But I'm saying it as like a matter of fact. I personally agree with you that like I agree with you also about Lana. I think that she also is like a whatever, if you want to say it's a order or it's just like I don't think she's a chaos magician, but I think she is in something. It's definitely something. It's definitely drawing from modern magic post 1947. It's very obvious if you see the signs just in her life, but like now that you're laying out the astrology, that kind of builds a foundation to draw like to make concretize these conclusions, like even the husband, he's a alligator tour guide or an alligator farmer. Like the alligator has very significant metaphysical meaning. It's like a dragon, right? Like it's very Ketu in a way. And so he tames dragons for a living. She's choosing to marry someone who tames dragons for. I just think that that's very significant. And as you're saying, it's in a stress. Her magical nature or where she draws her power from, you could even say, is in a stressed position. So you could say that also helps rectify the stress position if she has someone who can tame dragons. I'm thinking out loud, but I think there's something interesting with that.
Yeah, I thought of that too, and knowing that he is from Louisiana and the Bayou, and I thought, oh, wonder he's French, Jeremy Dufresne. I wonder if he's a little bit with the down with the Bayou magic stuff, or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that magical symbolism that practices that take place in Louisiana. They have their own complete culture based around it.
Mm-hmm.
And it occurred to me when I looked into him a little bit. I didn't do his chart, but it occurred to me that maybe that was the source of an attraction as well. Um, that she's got interesting stuff. I mentioned the Alicanto, which is a Latin American mythical bird, and being as she chose Lana del Rey, which is wool of the king, I talked about so much in the last discussion. That was a Latin American reference, but she's also being Elizabeth Woolridge Grant, very waspy name. She
Mm-hmm.
has a very waspy god in configuration to her ascendant, which is actually, this is fascinating that some of the asteroids were named after Welsh and Celtic gods. This one is Aran, Arwawn. I think I'm saying it right. And Aran is the Welsh god of the underworld, not in a threatening way so much like Hades was,
Mm-hmm.
but sort of he would bring people in and welcome them. He sort of was the conduit into the underworld, but also to see that they were in the right place, that they were properly placed. So she has a Ron there, which is her Celtic background. Grant, Woolridge Grant, very British sounding. And she has that element, and then the element of Latin, which is her name, Lana Del Rey. So she's representing both identities through her names in these asteroids. And another really cool one that she has is a more modern one, which is it's not Greek, Egyptian, Roman. It's a character from Lord of the Rings, because when the discovery of asteroids moved into the 20th and 21st centuries, they weren't so much about the classical education as they were in the 1800s. They started naming them for Lord of the Rings, people on television, people in the movies. So you get thousands of asteroids now with interesting names of different people. And this one is Varda, who was the queen of stars and light in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So
Wow.
her ascendant connects to Varda, which gave her this, like I said before, with the Alicanto, this light, guiding light element to certain people. She is a guide. She inspires people. She inspires people with what she knows through her experience. So that comes across, and that's another example of how the asteroids. It's interesting to look at the progression of their discovery, as I found when I was researching them. For a 100 years, they were named after classical myths. Then they broke away and they started naming them all kinds of things till we get to a level where there's an asteroid, Pecker, which was named after a person, David Pecker, but because of the vibration and the meaning of the word in common slang, it actually tells you something about that person in that way, which is a funny way that the asteroids resonate. I guess the name vibration resonates. You have an asteroid Pest. It was named after Budapest in Hungary, but it comes to represent a nuisance. So they are beginning to, once we've moved away from the classical mythology and those characters they represent, you're moving towards name vibration, name imprints. There's another one, Dick, that was named after somebody, Dick, but I found it prominent in the charts of rapists. These things take on a meaning of their own. There is a
Mm-hmm.
definite
Mm-hmm.
vibration,
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
definite impression of that, that quality of the item that it's referring to. And I could go on and on. I just found so many. And like I said, these are modern because they weren't going to name something Dick back in the 1800s. There's one named after a Frenchman, Prévert, but people started, astrologers way before me, started taking it as pervert. I thought, oh my God, why do you want to have that thing up there? Well, I started looking up perverts, and sure enough, there's that asteroid in their chart. So who am I to say, how we should evaluate them? But there's quite a few that in my book I really have fun with it. because they're sort of self-explanatory after a while. There's one for lie. It was named after a man, Sophius Lee, but it's Lie. And it could be in the chart of people who are liars. And there's
Did you
one
say
for a man
Sophius?
named,
I'm sorry, BD. Did you
yes,
say
so yes, I think it
Sophius?
was, I think so. Yeah, Sophis or Sophius. Let me look, see
That's
if I
very
have it right here.
interesting.
Yeah, it was a French person. Let me just see, I have my book right here. Lie, named after Norwegian mathematician, Marius Sophus Lee. Sophus. Marius
Sophis is
Sophus Lee.
interesting though, because that does have
Mm-hmm.
a Latin root in sophistry. So it's
Right,
like
that's
double,
right.
it's a double lie, right? So that
Yeah.
was very interesting. And I was just thinking when you were explaining like the naming conventions of the asteroids now, or in at least in the early 20th century to now, I've been exploring this idea of magic as a sort of extension of parafiction, meaning that like the mythology or the story layer, that's interchangeable as long as you compose it correctly, sort of organize it in a grammar, just like the naming of asteroids, in a way that makes syntactical sense. So I think that you're onto something here where they're naming things that aren't just true in vibration. Like I agree with you 100% that they are, that also is there's a resonance of a name, but maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
also looking at how that those things already refer to the name. Like the name is not necessarily, maybe it's just like astral body, I'll give it a magic number like 47, okay? But then but it means those things. It's like maybe that's like the one for Circe. And then there's another one that's like we'll say 56, and that's like the one for liars. And so maybe they all mean the same, like they mean what they mean, but the name is the way to identify them and sort of use modern stories to tell the grammar of the spell, if you want to call it that. I'm just speaking it's very speculative, but it is something that I'm thinking about because of the series that I've done with it's called Aeon of the Daughter. So I just think that there's
Right.
something really interesting with that, and how you can tell stories with names, because naming is so important. It's the power of calling things, it's the power of like what things
Mhm.
mean in the universe, what relationship things have with other things. So yeah, I just think there's something really fascinating about this, and like naming the, as I'm thinking, like the eyes on the tail of the dragon, because he's said to have thousands of eyes as scales. So like each little asteroid is like an eye, and so it's like there's a truth there, but it's sort of contained in other things. It's contained like in a mass. So,
Right.
but yeah, something really interesting. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but please you can
No, please
continue.
don't. No, don't apologize. That's a good point, because I think when I was like sort of stumbling through my early learning of them, the middle of last year, I think what struck me like a brick was, here I am reading about these asteroids. Now, okay, here's a man at his telescope in 1856, and he spots a body in the sky that he knows is new. It has never been seen before. It is, and so he claims the discovery of it, and he gives it its name. And because of the mindset back then, it was going to be the name of a mythological Greek or Roman princess, goddess, or woman. They didn't even name one for a man for like 100 years or so. It took a long time for them to start naming them for men, like Apollo and Orpheus. That came later. But in the 1800s, it was a woman, or they would name it after their mother or their girlfriend or their sister or their mistress, whoever. There was always a woman's name. Now, what got me was, okay, so they named it after, let's say, I'm looking at, for example, let's take Hylanome or Hylanome. I don't know what to mispronounce it. They name it after, it's a rock floating in space that gets this name by the discoverer astronomer who saw it in a telescope. Then they plot the location, the coordinates, so that at some point you can determine where it is in a horoscope. How on earth does it happen? Does it come to pass that what that myth represented, that the asteroid was named for, describes qualities of the person whose chart it appears in, prominently configured? That question I never asked myself about the planets. I just took for granted because the planets are around forever and astrology's been around forever. And I just didn't question, why does Mars represent aggression? Why does Venus represent beauty? We just took it for granted. It was assumed. But when you look at an asteroid, say, how can, okay, Orpheus shows up in the chart of these tragic musicians and mainly guitarists. He played the lyre. How does that happen that somebody who so apparently randomly took something in the sky and named it begins to describe a whole person's destiny or their characteristics? And I started to get blown away by that. I was like, I don't, how does, it's not random. There's nothing random about it. He may have taken his pencil and opened a mythology book and swirled it around and pointed it down on a name, but still it sticks. These are valid. You can interpret them and you can see their interpretations in the expressions of the persons that they're talking about.
Absolutely.
And I still can't answer it. I can't answer it. And that's why I keep going, because I'm so fascinated. I don't expect to be able to answer it, but it kind of lends me into a feeling of my own cosmic theory of that we are just all imbued with photons that are streaming through infinity, through all of us all simultaneously. It kind of reinforces that belief. Some people say, well, I can go by name vibration because I do believe that. And they all actually, to address your other point, they are numbered. They are all numbered up to, I think, 500,000 of, there's more than a million, but 500,000 are numbered, probably more than that now, because they're discovering like 400 a year at that rate. It's a lot. But they all have a number, and you have to know, I included all the numbers. You have to know the numbers because in certain software to look them up, you can only use the number. So I put in my book the number right next to their names because it's like you have to know that. So some of it could be numerology. Like I think chaos is like let me look up chaos. Chaos has a funny number. Chaos, no, it's not that one. But one is like 99942, and one is 66652. They just, you get into the numerology of it, but they're all numbered. Like Circe, I think, is 34. That might
That
mean
makes
something.
sense.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Apotheosis. I was going to tell you when you were explaining, I'll go back to 34 in a second, but when you were
Yeah.
explaining how the asteroids were named after women, sometimes wives, sometimes mistresses, sometimes, goddesses or mythological witches, this is very interesting to me because if you understand the Buddhist stories of Rahu, this is exactly like what it is. It's like his wives are in multiplicity, but he really only has the one wife. Like you're saying, Chaos and Circe have a, or not Circe, excuse me, Chaos and Ceres have a relationship. Is that correct, BD?
No, it is Circe. It's chaos
Okay,
and
it's
Circe.
Circe. So that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That actually makes more
Yeah.
sense because she's like a witch, right? And then you could
Right.
also say in the tantric iconography, she also has a sitar. So that is interesting also to your Orpheus point. And she's considered to be Naga Kanya. Well, Naga Kanya means a princess of the Nagas or princess of the dragons. So that's also very interesting. But when she is not in her singular form, she is many. It's really, we call it five. He has five animal-headed wives, but the five animal-headed wives can join together and become one. That's also interesting, I think. I don't know. Maybe you don't find that as like relevant, but when you're saying the thing, I think that there's maybe a relationship. And then the other thing about names, well, and light. So names are really color.
Oh
That's what
yeah.
I've really understood. It's like the color is just it's like really the naming of things. It's like you're naming the light. You're saying like what property it has, what metaphysical value it has, but that's really all it is. But maybe you could say that naming is like, as you and I were both saying, it is dialectical. Like there's a relationship between the object and the namer, and the object and the person who's like interacting with it. So
Mm-hmm.
you're in like a relationship. You're perceiving each other.
Right.
I don't know. Just an interesting idea. If
You
you
know, I
consider that
think
the
yeah, it's
asteroids are eyes.
no, it's interesting to me because, like I said, I'm still a novice, sort of wandering through this new landscape of asteroids, or shall I say, outer spacescape of asteroids. And any comments you make are so welcome because I'm just beginning to get it. I mean, I have eons to go to get a real grasp of it, and the more
I
I
don't think
find that I
so.
yeah no, but I feel that way because the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. That's how it always is with me. It's like I'm getting there, getting there, getting there, but you don't reach the point. But I think with this, I'm beginning to realize and really appreciate the power of myth and how, if you think
Yes.
about these 1.2 million bodies, I think, my God, the sky is like a gravel parking lot, filled with little rocks.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
no room for any space anymore. But if you think about it, all these bodies out there that we didn't know about, and I didn't know about because I didn't want to know about them for so many years when I was studying astrology, it's like, it's so freaky that they are teaching us kind of like our source all over again.
Hmm. Hmm.
They're bringing up our source, the source of humanity, and that's why the gods were so, in a way, so stupid sometimes and so nasty sometimes, because they were just an expression of humanity being reflected back on us. They
Yes.
were a higher level of being, but they did such ridiculous things. I mean, Zeus had how many kids by how many women? And it just, no wonder Hera was always jealous. Right? she
Yes.
she never
Yes.
got a moment's peace with him. But it's fascinating because you can see how, well, see, I always think of when I'm going to go back a ways, okay, and out myself. I studied Latin in high school. We don't study that anymore, but I had it for 4 years, and we had to translate a lot of old texts. Like, we translated the Aeneid, we translated poetry of Homer, and that made an impression on me because of all these mythical people. And they always said, Latin's a dead language. There's no reason to teach it anymore. And I couldn't disagree more for various reasons. But I was exposed to the myths when I was in high school. And they were always kind of a one-dimensional thing, like something old that I studied in class. And I loved Latin. I did really well with it because it was so interesting a language, and I just absorbed it naturally. I didn't have any trouble learning it at all. But it kind of stayed as something from the past. And now when I read these things by Homer, or I read about Virgil that I translated when I was in high school, and I read some of this stuff now, and I think this has so much meaning. I couldn't comprehend it when I was 17 years old, but this has so much meaning, and it's appropriate, and it's alive. I mean, these things live through us. They're just reflecting back to us from the sky, and they're all around. There are thousands of them above us in the heavens, and it's just remarkable that it's I don't know, can't grasp the word right now, but there's this ongoing progression of experience that was always the same. As they say, nothing is new under the sun. And I think that's what the impact of mythology. These were
Hmm.
humans. These were real people. They were gods
Hmm.
being human and being more mortal. That's back and forth, that whole thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's kind of like a story, and I think that hooks me the most is the story behind everything, because that's why
Hmm.
I like to write, and that's why astrology to me is a story about somebody
Astrology
or
is
something.
Astrology is absolutely a story. It is absolutely to be taken. I believe personally very strongly that it should be taken as both a practical wisdom science, so like using it like how you do to sort
Right.
of cast an event so you can see the occulted aspects of it. So I believe in that. But then I
Mm-hmm.
also think that it should be taken at both the magical and the mythological level. So to be understood as like an internal thing, and then also like a story, like you're saying. So I
Right.
think that it's the three things working together, and then you have like astrology's like really, then you're like getting into real magic because you're putting it all together, you're kind of synthesizing it, alchemizing it, and you're giving it like a life, like a name
Mm-hmm.
kind of. So yeah, I
Right.
definitely think that astrology is, that's why I think that if you link Kabbalah with astrology, it actually makes learning the tree so much easier for other people, in my opinion. This is maybe not
Mm-hmm.
true, but at least in my perception, that is true. So I think that it's such a useful tool. And, I think that the way you've explained it is, it's my mind is blown because of how similar I personally find it to the Rahu Ketu story in Tantric and Puranic astrology. So
Mm-hmm.
I just think, wow, like we have different containers, different vessels, maybe, to contain very similar stories. So they might, contain the same liquid, but they're slightly different. They might be like a different lot number, a different batch number, but it's really like they're interrelated more than they're not. So yeah, I find it incredibly fascinating, and I think that when you told me you were doing a book on asteroids and planetary bodies, like the at least the ones that you are referencing, I was really excited because I told you, like Rahu Ketu, he's like my dude. I like him. He's a very important Buddhist deity. So he gets like a little bit upgraded from Indian astrology. He gets to
Mm-hmm.
become like a serious protector. So I
Mm-hmm.
just think like, we're living in like this age filled with potential. He is sort of, I mean, he can be many things, and sometimes corrosive and sometimes malefic and materialistic and sometimes destructive, but he is in his core potential. So I think that there's a potential to create new knowledge in exactly what you're doing, like to build a body of new wisdom science through the exploration of the asteroids. So I'm really
Mm-hmm.
excited. I've been hooked the whole time. Thank you so much, BD.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm just thrilled that I finally broke down and got over my overwhelm about the asteroids that I felt when I first started hearing about them when I started to study astrology. I was like, wait a minute, I don't have the bandwidth for that. But in all due time, I wasn't ready. Now this past year was the year that I was ready to embrace it, to the point where after studying them for maybe only 2 or 3 weeks, I thought, I got to make a list. This is a lot of stuff to learn. There was no list. And I was like, why is there no list? I looked in Amazon and I was looking all over for a book that would help me learn instead of cherry pick and go to this website. And then this blog was good. This blog had information. This other website had information. But I was going all over to find out stuff. And I thought, well, we don't have one. I'll make one. I mean, why not? It's basically a research task more than an interpretive journey. Although I did interpret a lot of them that did not have interpretations. I researched the myths and the characters, and I drew my own conclusions as to interpretations in the book
Can you
because of what. Yeah.
Sorry, Abidi, can you give me one? Can you give me one or more examples? I would love to just hear like a sample of that because that's really interesting to me. That it's almost like the production of the continuation of the story. So I really love that you did that, and so I'm personally very curious.
Okay, I opened the book to number 899, which is Jocasta. She was the mother of Oedipus. And Oedipus is the guy who killed his father in order to marry his mother, who was Jocasta. And then he went into such a state of remorse that he blinded himself. There's a big story about that in Greek tragedy. And Jocasta was also the mother of Antigone and Ismene, who also had very traumatic lives. So I didn't find an interpretation for Jocasta. So I read the story of Antigone and Oedipus. I knew the story of Oedipus pretty much, pretty famous, especially in psychology circles. We have the Oedipus complex, which kind of oddly fits into my discussion of Elvis Presley, but that's maybe we don't get to that or whatever. So here's my interpretation: may reference danger through a partner or beloved, trauma or drama through a dysfunctional family, suffering through the behavior of others, including one's own children. So therefore, I think if you see a Jocasta, especially if it's not well aspected in the birth chart, the person's going to have a certain amount of family trauma or dysfunction through the siblings or the parents, either through loss or, molestation, something nefarious like that. And I drew that from their stories because the story of Oedipus killing his father to sleep with his mother is pretty damn heavy. So the trauma would have to be a deep-seated psychological trauma. And that's how I read that one. Here was one that was very little about. Number 127, Johanna, discovered in 1872. They think it was named after Joan of Arc. So I thought about Joan of Arc. And so I wrote possible interpretation as a savior or one who sacrifices for a cause, someone who places their beliefs and ideologies on a higher plane than most. And so I started looking around for people that had that. And I find Queen Christina of the Netherlands, who is a very big proponent of causes, especially the environment, to give more than you have to save the community at large. And so every time I did one, I had to try and find an example that would be, sort of support my interpretation. And here was one, this is unusual that we have a Chinese one. There aren't too many of those, but there was one, I'm not going to pronounce it right, Juewa, Juewa, number 139. It was discovered in 1874, but it's Chinese for Star of China's Fortune. And there's no interpretative anything in any of the research I did. So I thought, well, when it's named after a city or a country, as many of the asteroids were, it may tie the person in somehow to that location, to that culture, to the language, to the history. Like if you have the asteroid Germania, I found that in the chart of a couple of prominent Nazis. I think it was in Hitler's chart because I did his chart. But if we look at Juewa, I thought it's got to be somebody Chinese. Sure enough, it's in the chart of Chairman Mao. And so that kind of crystallized my interpretation of that. And I think I also looked up the other guy, Chiang Kai-shek. I didn't find that, but I found another Chinese asteroid in his chart. So a lot of it, the fun of this was really trying to not only interpret what I found that had no background to it, or think of people that it might be relevant to. And so I was able, with a lot of the really nasty asteroid, like Chaos and Apophis is terrible. It's like the god of destruction. Apophis, actually, it's got a weird number also. There's Apophis, there's Anubis, which is god of the dead. Apophis 99942 is Apophis number. And Apophis, we find Apophis in exactly on the son of Jeffrey Epstein. And we find it in the chart of Anton LaVey, who founded the Church of Satan. It squares his Mars. We find it, interestingly, in Elon Musk's chart. Because
that's not a surprise.
No. And we find Jeffrey Dahmer, he got a lot of the bad ones. Jeffrey Dahmer has an Apophis. There were two British serial killers, Fred and Rose West. They both had Apophis in each of their charts. And Jack Parsons, who was the founder of the Jet Propulsion Lab in California and a colleague of L. Ron Hubbard and Crowley. And Parsons was an engineer who was also into heavy magic, so much so that when he was building a rocket, he blew himself up. He had the wrong alchemy. had the wrong alchemy going on, or he was blown up. I don't know. But he made a mistake in his formula somehow. But he had Apophis. So it was fun because when I was able to really feel the asteroid and find the right people most of the time. I don't have an example for every single one because there's over 400 of them, and just some of them just didn't resonate. I looked up numbers of people, and the asteroid just did not resonate with any of them. But for most of them, I got some really decent examples, and they helped guide me in how I saw the asteroid. And some of them are so funny. They have, when we got away from the myths, we got into the 21st century. They started to just pick gods with really unusual names. One that is a personal favorite of mine for a lot of reasons is Borasisi. Borasisi is what they call a Cubano. And I love the names for these guys. It's the names you never heard of. You can't pronounce most of them. But a Cubano is way, way outside of the orbit of Neptune. Most of them are between Mars and Jupiter. They're much closer to Earth. But when you get out into the netherlands of Neptune, Pluto, you have bodies that are very eccentric in their behavior. Their elliptical orbit is really warped. They don't have a gravitational pull to the planets that they're next to. So they're kind of outliers. So I know Borasisi there were some interpretations that I differed with, and I just put my own in the book. And was like, let people explore and find what they will. And if they differ with me or disagree with me, that's fine, because this is all an exploration at this stage. But Borasisi was somebody, in my view, who thinks outside the box. Somebody who does his own thing. He's a pioneer. He doesn't march to the beat of the same drummer as everybody else. And who falls into that but Albert Einstein? And also, I think J. Robert Oppenheimer, the guy who developed the Manhattan Project, the atom bomb. And a lot of these theoretical physicists, Stephen Hawking, for example, had these Cubano type bodies prominent in their charts because they are exceptional. They're on a different level, at least scientifically, in terms of scientific thought. They're so far advanced, not in a judgmental way, but mathematically, physically, their understanding of the universe is on a whole different level than ours. So that they would have Borasisi, or they're called trans-Neptunian objects, TNOs. The TNOs turned up a lot in people who were very forward-thinking people. So that was I hope I answered your question in terms of how did I find examples and stuff. I just kind of extrapolated from what, sometimes it was the name, but when you get into more recent discoveries, they're so far out. They couldn't have been seen a couple of 100 years ago because they didn't have the technology. They're so far out, and their behavior is so unique that I think that begins to influence the interpretation as well.
100%. Well, let me add a little mythological element to this. Is that I'm sure Zach will be laughing right now, both of them, because we just recorded an episode on our Twyman series. This obviously will have aired by this record date, but this release, excuse me. So there's an idea that like with the Kabbalistic tree BD, if you attribute Neptune to chokmah, because chokmah is the unmanifest kind of cloud of the cloud that appears in the sky, like just seeing the kind of fluffy cumulus cloud above you. That's kind of what chokmah is. It's unmanifest wisdom. But there's an idea that maybe there's a Shakti, or like a feminine divine aspect. And we even spoke a little bit about this in our first episode. But she is the smoke-eating widow. So what the idea is that she kind of consumes the smoke of Ketu. She contains all the potential that he is. So when you're getting closer to Neptune, that makes sense to me. that you're going away from convention, you're going towards the carnal ground, you're going towards something that's very radical, very trans-Neptunian, which is something that I spoke about directly. I talked about trans-Plutonian, trans-Uranian, and the trans-Neptunian, and then I threw in the idea of the trans-Aquarian. So I'm just saying that this is so perfect for me because it's like building on stories that I've been building myself. But then you come in and you add in this amazing material kind of wisdom science layer where it's like a
Mm-hmm.
mappable system that I can look at and then say, wow, actually, I do know what I'm talking about. I do have like a narrative foundation. There is
Mm-hmm.
something here and there's something really interesting. And so I agree. And it is like a very radical, it's sometimes considered to be a sphere of crazy wisdom or the goddess who's associated with that. She's like, she gives like, it's very radical, it's very shamanic, it's very out there. But once you kind of understand what it is, it's everything. It doesn't seem like anything at first, but
Right.
then, right, when you put it into material science, practical application, it becomes something amazing, something incredible. So I just think that there is some really interesting way that that correlates to that same story or to the Kabbalistic tree. I think that there's something how Neptune, Ketu, meaning all of the asteroids, but especially the ones further towards Neptune, they interact with that. Like there's something that obviously people knew about. Is what I personally think, that people understood that there's like a motion, gravitational motion that is sort of
Yeah.
drawing the, you could say, the ice vapors or the rock dust or the stardust, and it's drawing them in just ever so slowly into Neptune. So I think that that's what I'm trying to say, is that there's some kind of corollary. It doesn't have to be mythological, but there is something also astronomical.
Well, it's interesting you say that because as you get way out into the hinterlands out beyond Neptune, most of, not all, many of the bodies are just ice. And ice, there's vapors, there is steam and fog and
Mm-hmm.
smoke because it's so incredibly cold. When you get to Pluto, it's like all these bodies are chunks of ice. And as you were talking about the fog and the smoke, I had to pull up Nephili because Nephili is another one that baffled me. Nephili 431. She was the mythical mother of centaurs. Okay, somehow I didn't get the connection why, but she refers to clouds, fog, and smog. So, because she refers to that, she ruled over the clouds. Nephili did. That's what was her domain. So I interpret it as where we do not see clearly or where we see beyond the normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I guessed at that one, but I look it up, and who has that is Mahatma Gandhi, who
Mm-hmm.
saw way beyond the normal to his nonviolent stance on the existence of humanity. And a mentalist, the guy actually just passed away, the amazing Kreskin, who was a mentalist who could determine things just through vibration. And they both had Nephili. So that was real interesting to uncover that. But as to your point, yeah, these bodies are like floating ice. And that there's another interesting aspect to that is if you have noticed, I don't read the news, but I'll see the news if I go to a website. It's in my face. I can't ignore it. I don't go looking for it. But lately, there is so much information all of a sudden on asteroids. Is this asteroid going to strike the Earth? This asteroid, do we go up to are we visiting the asteroids? What is this asteroid about? And what I found out through my research is the ones that are not just ice have, a lot of them have minerals, precious metals. And so that leads me to think, well, something's going to be going on. They're all of a sudden exposing us to asteroids. Why? There are asteroids up above in the solar system that are worth literally quadrillions of dollars because of the rare and precious metals that they contain and the minerals. There's one in particular, Davida, number 511. Davida is worth 24 quadrillion, which is 24 with 18 zeros after it, just because of its content that they have been able to determine by spectroscopy. Now, do you not think that somebody on Earth is going to want to get their hands on 24 quadrillion dollars, or even a small fraction of it? So I think we're being led into this generation of awareness of asteroids, not just for the beneficial aspect, or like what I'm trying to express, but there's value to them. They are trying right now to figure out how to mine these things. And what concerns me about that, not to get off too far off the subject, but there is a vested interest in going up there and mining these for their content. But is it hard to mine them? Isn't it easier to maybe blow one up? Is it easier to maybe entice one to crash into Earth where we wouldn't have to go so far to mine it? Those are the kind of concerns I get when I start to see it in the news, because they're focusing on the value and can they hit Earth. Therefore, if one strikes Earth at some point in the near future, oh, they were talking about that and it happened. I may be getting way off a tangent here.
No.
But there's the content. I was talking about them being ice, but there's also another content of them. And if you want to know the main sponsor of interspace research is not NASA, it is their daddy, the Vatican. And I have seen that in my research. I actually talked about it a while ago on a podcast with the Occult Rejects, how the Vatican now is heavily invested in space exploration, which seems, in a funny way, they're messing with creation theory on the one hand because of what they're looking into. But on another hand, there's a lot of wealth up there. There's a lot of wealth floating, according to how we value things on Earth, I'm saying. There's a lot of wealth floating in the solar system. At some point, they're trying to send satellites already to bring back samples, and that's how they determine the construction of the asteroid. And one of them, I had trouble believing this. I'm not sure that I still do. One of them contains diamonds, which could be true because a lot of them have carbonaceous material, and that's what makes a diamond under high pressure. So maybe there is one floating around with diamonds, but do you not think that somebody with a whole lot of money, deep pockets, is going to want to get their hands on that asteroid at some point? So they're coming into our consciousness through the media, I think, for those reasons. And also, let's not forget a little fear porn. Hey, this asteroid is going to crash into Earth next year. What are we going to do about it? It's always good for a little fear porn. But they are coming more and more into our consciousness in many different ways. And if I'm seeing it through MSN, which I think is a terrible media source for any accurate information, but I'm seeing just the mention of it. It's really interesting to me how they're bringing them to life for us, not the way I want to bring them to life for us. But these are going to be part and parcel of our very near future for various reasons, not all of them honorable.
I agree with you, but let me offer you this, Phoebe, is that I believe some people do worship what I would call Ketu or Rahu Ketu, not the Buddhist conception, more of the Atarvadas or Puranic conception. But they don't think of it in those dharmic terms. It's more maybe left-hand path, maybe like Temple of Set. But I believe they do worship the dragon. I've seen occult texts that like very explicit about it. And maybe the trans-Neptunian is related to that in some ways. So I believe that because as we've said, Mars inflames Ketu. Well, it makes sense. Elon has a preoccupation with Mars. Lurianic Kabbalah has a preoccupation with Gevura, which is related to Mars. It's related to the fire of transformation, sort of like the tower card that you referenced. And so I think that there's absolutely a kind of, I know J.J. Vance has called it star god cargo cults. I'm not sure exactly how I want to frame it. I don't know exactly their theology or their cosmology or what they believe, but I recognize elements in it Just like I can recognize elements in the Greek stories and be like, okay, what is similar to like the stories that I'm familiar with. So I think that there is something there. I think that they like the dragon because it can be like, as we said, if there's something human potential related to it, like it's how it's like a snake. It's snakes and ladders. It's like how the people can move up the tree, but they also can fall down with the vices.
Right.
So I think that, yeah, I think that they push their religion or their worldview, because it doesn't have to be a religion, it just has to be their worldview, which is that these things are in this like desolate black vacuum that is space or void or whatever that is. But in Buddhism, we say that the space is really it's always there, it's pristine, but it's not, it's empty in a Buddhist way, but it's not empty in the way that people think of that word. Empty really means massless and
Mm-hmm.
luminous, like you were saying, like how light travels through, like we are just
Mm-hmm.
photons like
Mm-hmm.
racing through the
Right.
universe. Like that's very much what how Buddhism describes the sort of
Mm-hmm.
world. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, BD. I think that they show us things. I think there's multiple layers. I think they try and like illuminate. I think they try and convert. I think they try and preordain. I think they try and reveal the method, as Michael Hoffman would say. I did an episode with Low IQ, more on thoughts and prayers about the Michael Hoffman and Twilight language. That's also very interesting. And I just think they're telling a story. Doesn't necessarily mean that is the story. This doesn't mean it's the perennial story or like the true story, but it is a story. So I think it's like with all stories, it's probably worth paying attention to at least a little bit.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that there's a huge confluence of concepts and theories and philosophies and even religions that are starting to. We're all starting to. I don't know if we unravels the word, but as you pull on these threads that we're pulling on, we get more and more to the same source,
Mm-hmm.
to the
Mm-hmm.
same
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
information via to be it through Tibetan or through the Christian or through the
Mm-hmm.
Greco-Roman or the Egyptian. We start to pull on those threads, and you start to see a lot of commonalities, and that's I think the power of this is it eventually interconnects everybody to a level, and that may sound overly simplified, but the more you dig, you come to the same roots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Absolutely. This isn't, I mean, listen, BD, this is a weird, this is an axial age show. So I do believe that the Aeon is turning. I've like obviously turned that
Mm-hmm.
idea into a whole series. So I agree with you. I think there's like something either perennial, axial, or traditionalist, but those are obviously three different things, but they also refer to sort of the same thing in a way. So I'm there. I'm like you want to talk Hyperborea? I'm there.
Yeah.
So so thank you so much, BD. I really appreciate it. Please come back to do Elvis. I really want to hear. I'm sorry, I just it was
Oh, that's okay.
almost like electric. It's like electric when you come
Yeah.
on, and
Oh, thank you. I hope
so
I'm
I'm
not
gonna
too
let you.
shocking to make a
It's not
bad
the
pun there, but
problem.
anyway. No, but thank you
Um,
for having me. I'll be happy to come on anytime. Elvis is so fascinating from so many angles. I just started looking at him, and it started with the asteroid, then I got into the gematria, and then the whole king thing, the kings and the
awesome.
pharaohs, and it's just amazing. And I didn't really want to launch into it tonight because we got on to such a good discussion with Lana and the
Absolutely.
asteroids, and I didn't want to veer too far off of that. So whenever you want me back, I'm game. I'll be happy to come back and talk Elvis anytime.
Awesome. I even know the art I want to use for it. So thank you so much, BD. Yes, you'll be coming back much sooner than the last time.
Oh,
Thank
thanks.
you. You've made it to season 2 now. This will air in the 40s. You know the number. I won't say it, but I mean, it's. Thank you so much, BD, for your like support, for coming on the show, taking a chance on a junior reject like me, and I appreciate it so much. And you're a great. I find you hilarious, always intelligent, interesting, and I appreciate it. So please plug your site and your channel, and I will make sure that it's all in the show notes for when this episode drops.
Oh yeah, I
Please,
should
please
mention
give
the
your
book
spiel.
actually. I'll give myself a shameless plug for the book. Just came out.
Absolutely.
It's called Asteroids, Our Cosmic Influencers, and it's available in ebook form and paperback at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and the whole gamut of online retailers. It can be purchased. And Jin, for having me on and having such a stimulating discussion, I'm going to send you a copy of the ebook so that you can see what I've been talking about. If you want to do
Wow.
some reference work and see
I love
what
that.
it's all about, I'd love to gift you a copy, so I'll do that. And my channel, I'm thinking of starting a new channel just for the asteroids, because my other channel is so hard to define and it gets lost on YouTube. It doesn't get any views because I can't describe the kind of work I do. It's not pure astrology. It's not pure philosophy. It's not pure gematria. It's a mishmash of how I see things.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm. Hmm.
the channel Star Sleuth is really laboring along. It does not get much attention. So I think I'm going to just leave that sit for a repository of more of my interviews. And I'm going to start a new channel for the asteroids sometime in the coming month and do a volume 2 of my book that's going to be in the works for this spring. And my website is strangebutTrueCrime.com. Deals with all the kind of high weirdness that I find in true crime and in other incidents. And there's a bit of astrology in there as well. And I have Linktree. It's my handle is Star Sleuth, so I can be found at Linktree with all the links to my books and my website and channels and all that good stuff.
Amazing. So that will all be in the show notes, and your Elvis episode will be perfectly timed to plug your new channel and the part 2 to Asteroids. So thank you so much, BD. It's always a pleasure. You know that you're a perennial guest as well as welcome anytime, and I hope everybody checks out your first episode and all the work you've done on your both on your channel and on Rejects, and also, of course, buy your book. And thank you so much for gifting me your ebook. That's a huge, I appreciate it so much. And I think that, yeah, I definitely will reference it in our next conversation. And hopefully I'll level up a little bit as an astrologer. So thank you so much, BD. And I hope you have an amazing night. And we'll speak really soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. It's a pleasure.